What is up, everybody? Welcome into the Bat Flip, where we discuss everything baseballs. I'm Landon Raby. With me, Dylan Taylor. Not the greatest of weekends.
Not even words, just noises.
Yeah, it's we're here though. We're staying consistent. We're going to try to be as positive as possible, given the circumstances. But just not a great weekend for Tennessee baseball. It just kind of it I think everybody's kind of in agreement that Missouri just wanted it more. And I know it was cold, the weather was bad, but there's not an excuse to go out there and just lay an egg against Missouri, which is your coach's alma mater. I mean, that's a game I'm sure Tony Vitello really wanted to win, and then he didn't really get to. He only was there for half the series, so just not a good weekend all the way around. It just seemed like Tennessee couldn't wait to get back home. I'm going to wait and hit the panic button and to see how we do against Texas A&M. But yeah, Tennessee's got some issues, and if they're not fixed quickly, it doesn't get any easier from here. This is probably like I think Missouri is definitely a slept-on team, but this is probably your easiest road series of the season, and it did not go well. So, kind of, what are your thoughts on the weekend? I guess this is going to be kind of a short show because there's not a. I'm tired of being so negative, but there's not a lot of positivity to say about this weekend.
No, I mean it. Looking at the schedule ahead, I mean Georgia maybe will be an easier road series, but I mean in terms of rivalry, they're definitely going to come in wanting it too. So I mean I'm like you. I'm going to wait to hit the panic button fully. I mean it. Trying to think on a scale to 10 what my panic level is at. I mean it's moderate though because it's the only thing holding me back is I'm just going to say, yeah, it was cold. Like maybe, you know, it, you, they're a little bit more used to that. So maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
used to getting some hits in the cold, but the bats shutting down was alarming. I mean, you give up, what was it, 7 and 7? Yeah. I mean, that not great from a pitching perspective, but going forward in the SEC, you got to know like teams are going to score. Like no matter how good your pitchers are, eventually you're going to give up some runs. So the bats going cold literally was the biggest, most alarming thing.
Well, Zane Denton hits that 2-run home run in the seventh in the first game of the doubleheader. Other than that, you score 4 runs on the weekend. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just not great. Not a recipe for success. I think there is going to be off games. Hopefully not as bad as what the pitching was this weekend, but there's going to be some games where teams are going to get hits, and your bats have to be able to get you out of a hole. And to this point, I don't know if I'd have a ton of faith in them to do that. I mean, especially like going into the SEC, no. Um, but the starting pitching is the head scratcher to me. But it's also something I'm like, these kids didn't forget how to pitch. I know Chase Dolander is sitting at 96, 97. I don't care what, some guy on Twitter told me he was sitting at 91, 92. That's just not true. Um, but, when it's as cold, that fastball doesn't have that kind of juice on it. So, when you're sitting 94, yeah, there's a big difference in that 98. So I think they're kind of sitting on that fastball a little bit, um, and they're hunting it. They knew Tennessee was going to fill up the strike zone, and Chase Dolander got tagged. Chase Burns got tagged a little bit, but he did have 10 strikeouts in the game. It's hard to really put the whole thing on him. He had some mistakes, but you just didn't have anything going offensively, and you put that together with not your best pitching performances, all three guys, and then the errors, man. That was the worst part for me. Just terrible. I mean, Maliahuna drops a fly ball at shallow outfield, and Christian Moore gets a flip from Maui to second base to end the inning and drops it. Blake Berg doesn't have his foot on first base. We couldn't field a fly ball in the outfield. I mean, it was just rough. I mean, I started singing to myself, da, 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 like Bad News Bears. It was
That's what it
that
felt
bad.
like.
Yeah.
And especially on Maui's end, coming for a guy who just last week, 2 weeks ago, we kind of talked about like, we've seen some kind of shakiness on the defensive end. So, we kind of equated it to Russ then, kind of wanted to see him pick it up a little bit. So not great to kind of take a step even further back. But I mean, I'm kind of where you're at just because the pitching doesn't concern me as much because we've seen them do it in the SEC
Sure.
before. Like
Sure.
that's where they all kind of made their names last year. Especially Beam was, you're kind of wondering, can you get the first two games? Because you wonder, do you have enough with Beam in that third game? And I mean, he proved himself time and time again last year. So we've seen it from that end. It's proven dominance.
Mhm.
So you can kind of get by with, hey, maybe it's rare that all three guys are off by that much, but I mean, you still got 10 strikeouts there, but it's rare that all three guys don't look like themselves at the same time. The lineup, however, all new. So that's the more concerning part because you don't have that evidence to go off of against SEC opponents. So you hope that this isn't the new normal on that end. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's
Drew Beam gave up 4 runs, all unearned. I mean,
yeah,
that's just it's unacceptable. And especially that last game, you would think that they would show a little bit of fight. One hit. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, in that game, nobody hit, but throughout the entire weekend, the bottom of the lineup just wasn't good. No one really had anything, and I feel like you're kind of in a dilemma, offensive and defensively. The guys you want to have in your outfield, Kyle Booker and Christian Scott, can't get it done at the plate. Well, Dylan Dreiling and Kavaris Tears aren't getting it done in the field, so you're kind of doing a cost benefit analysis. Who do you put in the lineup? Who are you willing to risk? Are you willing to risk more in the field or more at the plate? And right now, I just don't know if there's a great option there.
And I mean, hey, maybe we're both saying we're not hitting the panic button too much because hey, maybe you look back on the year and at the end of the year, like Mizzou is a top tier SEC team. Now, to me, that's still not an excuse because you've clearly got the more talented roster. So
Yeah,
it's not a good excuse, but maybe you do look back at the end of the year and be like, oh, well, Mizzou actually did that to a lot of teams. Maybe the field up in Columbia was the biggest home field advantage. Maybe it's still 20 degrees in July there. You never know. Because we said, we don't think there's ever sunshine peeking through there. So it you hope that that's not the new normal. But regardless, even if they are a top team this year, you're still more talented. So that maybe you lose the series. Okay, like maybe you drop all three games, but you at least show some fight. You didn't see any of that, so
yeah.
it's alarming. But I'm I'm trusting Tony V until he gives me a reason not to. And I mean, while it's tough, I mean, I was thinking about it the other day. That's really the first time since he's been here that a team just looked like they didn't want to play. So maybe it's just an outlier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping it's just the weather. That's what I'm clinging to. But even Tony V, I mean, that's another issue. It's like, man, you gotta be in the dugout.
Yeah,
I understand you're fiery but no umpire is going to give you any favors from
no,
here on out. That's gone. So, um, yeah, I mean, find a way to you want your teams to find a way to win. How about you find a way to keep yourself in the dugout? I think this team desperately needs their head guy. Whereas, I mentioned this on last night's show. It's like this team doesn't have that same nucleus. Is they don't have an Evan Russell, a Drew Gilbert, a Luke Lipsius. Jake Rucker, guys that have been in the program for so long. They just don't Connor Pavoloni. They just don't have that. So, I feel like they kind of lean a little bit on Tony to be that leader.
They
That
need a coach. They
yeah,
still need coaching up, and not to say that Beck and Gilbert at times didn't, but they could manage. Like if they don't have that leadership for a little while, it's what you're saying. Like they had enough guys in the locker room where it's like, hey, he got thrown out. Like we can still steer the ship here. Like no
right.
big deal. This is still, I mean, you look coming into the weekend, you see the number two, number three, depending on whatever outlet you look at, and you say, oh yeah, that team is set in stone, like they're solid. That's not the case. Like they're very talented, which was the reason for that high ranking, but still very much a developing team. So if you don't have your coach out there in tough series on the road, like we love the fire, but if the fire, I get trying to do something like that to fire your guys up a little bit, but even after that, I mean, it looked like they were still
Yeah,
dead.
it almost looked
So
worse,
yeah,
right?
it didn't help it. You don't say it hurt your guys, but it definitely didn't help them.
Yeah. Yeah, got to find a way to be in the dugout somehow. And you just, going back to my point about the guys that aren't here anymore. I mean, it's like, your most veteran guys in college baseball are transfers.
Yeah.
You got some young guys, that are still young, and Tiers and Dryling and even Blake Burke and Christian Moore. They were those young guys. They didn't have to be a leader, um, and they're kind of thrown into that. And pitching might be a little different. I don't know kind of how that. Camden Sewell, I'm sure, is one of the top dogs there, and but who's going to check somebody? And if Tony V's not there, who's a Luke Lipsius or a Drew Gilbert that's going to check somebody and be like, "Yo, that's no, here we go." Like I'm getting on base. Who's getting me in? That kind of thing. And it just didn't feel like that team had any spark or anything going for them this weekend. It was just bleh.
Well, it's different because those guys that were the leaders on last year's team were also your top performers
Mm-hmm.
from the previous 2 years. Where I mean, it's not to hate on anybody like a Christian Scott, who's one of the more experienced guys. I mean, I don't know of anybody lineup wise that's more experienced than him, unless I'm just forgetting somebody obvious. But it's no knock against Christian Scott, but he's not exactly first round pick, second round pick like you had on the previous team. So
Mm-hmm.
it being a leader is one thing, but being a leader that then goes out and shows you why he's the leader with not just how he carries himself, but how he plays, it's two totally different things. One of them's great, the other one's really great. So that I think that matters very much. Somebody's got to step up and be that guy that also does it on the field. You would hope that it is somebody like a Maui Ahuna. He plays arguably one of the most important positions on the field. He is a veteran guy, even though he hasn't been here. So maybe it comes down to just a little more need more time to mesh there. I don't know what it is, but it's got to be somebody to take you to the level you want to go. It's got to be somebody that consistently produces too, that's leading the team or one of the leaders.
Right. And if you have any questions, drop those in the chat. We'd love to get to those. I don't expect this thing to go too long because I am tired of being negative. I can't wait until Tuesday night and this weekend to kind of get that bad taste out of my mouth because it was unwatchable. Like I had to turn it off. Like I was in that bad of a mood. It killed my mood. The errors, and then I mean we have to be more aggressive at the plate. I understand being patient helps you, as a hitter, but we're letting fastballs go right by us. And, everything that we've seen so far this year, we have trouble hitting off speed stuff. And so if you're down, you let a fastball go by you, you miss on one or foul one off. Hey, I know what's coming those next couple pitches, and it's off speed. Prove that you can hit it. And up to this point, I don't think Tennessee has done a great job of hitting off speed pitches. And this weekend, it showed double digit strikeouts in all three games. and two of
Well,
those you only played 7 innings.
yeah, and patience is fine. I'm not knocking that at all, but with how the first game went, I would think the next two games you'd be like, hey, I rather go down swinging than just thinking you could get walked and then looking stupid on the third strike. Like at a certain point, you got to be like, hey, this may not be a series where we can sit back and kind of let the other team beat themselves. Like you got to go out and do something about it, and you never saw that switch flip, which you wonder if Tony V's in the dugout there. Like, does that help a little bit? Now, you didn't. He came back for the third game, so you didn't see it there either. But somebody comes back to what we were just talking about. Like somebody's got to say, hey, like doing way too much watching. Like just if you're gonna go down swinging, and if you fly out on the first pitch, hey, like you put a good swing on it at least. But you can't you can't wait for good things to happen and then just hope that they're going to hang a fastball when you're down two strikes, because that's not going to happen a lot in the SEC.
Yeah. No, not with 2 strikes. And it just looked like our team was fooled. I mean, like, I'm not a college baseball player. I will admit that. But if I'm down 0-2, I know what's coming. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, you don't have to be a college
These
baseball
teams,
player.
all these teams game plan. They watch film and have a scouting report and know exactly, like, that's what makes a great teams. They have great scouting. Tennessee is one of the best at that.
Just ask Halverson. He should know.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Tony V should know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just bad this weekend, and dust it off again. Don't hit the panic button. Stop being so negative on Twitter. It sucks. It made me want to just, like, I got to put this phone down. Like, I love Twitter. Twitter is one of my favorite things. But man, when people get on there, and I understand, like, a lot of people, especially Tennessee baseball fans, are a little spoiled because they haven't been a fan for very long. And here they are, and we're riding cloud nine. You get this 2020 team. It ends the season. That team is one of the best in the country. You come back and you light it up. You make it to Omaha, and then the next year you're the number one team in the country. I mean, we've been riding this high, and in this sport, it is tough to maintain that success. And I'm not saying that Tennessee can't get back to that. I'm not saying that at all. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they do have a year where they're not the best team in the country.
Yeah, and I mean it's not, you're not that far removed from it, honestly. I convinced myself I was a mush because I think it was the first game where we had press passes, and I think it was the right state game that I went up for during
Mm-hmm.
the COVID shortened season, that it was maybe 20 degrees there, and it was kind of the same game, like just kind of looked lifeless. Now that was a midweek game, I think, compared to an SEC series on the road where your head coach used to coach at, that should kind of fire you up a little bit. So obviously there were differences, but I mean, I remember then, like, it's like, hey, that's baseball. Like that was kind of the mood around it. From we talked about on a previous episode, like not many fans in the crowd there because it was so cold, partially. But I mean, it wasn't. I remember the vibe leaving the stadium wasn't like, oh no, like what's going on. It was like, hey, that's baseball. So we're not that far removed from it. But I mean, we're being negative, but at the same time, it's like
There are
part of
some issues that need to be pointed out. Like,
right. Part
we are
of
going to
it,
be real on this show. I mean, I
yeah.
know we don't love talking about losses, and after Sunday, I was just like, man, do we even do a show tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like,
And I mean, we give him the benefit of the doubt because, like I said earlier, like this is really the first time that for 3 games in a row, this team, since Tony's been here, that they just look like they didn't want to play baseball. So
yeah.
they get the benefit of the doubt, and I think they'll be fine too. Like I don't see anything that can't be fixed. Like it's what we've talked about before. It's like part of it is an approach thing, and then it's just the little things in the field, like that. You can do it. So in my mind, it is all an approach thing. It's just you've got a lot of young guys that have to step up now and realize, like, hey, like, we have to do it. There's nobody else now. Like, it's our time. So it's not anything that can't be fixed in the long term, but you just wonder, when does this team hit their stride, like we've seen teams in the past. You hope it's not too late in the season, but if it's next weekend, that's great. But you don't want. I know one thing. You don't want to have a performance like that against LSU, because
Mhm.
you'll get housed all 3 games then.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, Florida's another team. South Carolina, Texas A&M even. I know they're 1-2 so far, but I mean, still not a team that you want to go in, licking your wounds and feeling sorry for yourself and thinking, talent just you don't win with talent anymore. Especially this team, you know, it, you gotta go out there and show out. You can't just show up and win. I don't think that's who this team is. At least they haven't showed it to this point. So you gotta figure something out. I don't know if it's a leadership issue. I don't know if it's just cold weather. The good thing about cold weather is, you end the season in June. So I mean, it's going to be warm. So hopefully that whatever that is. I mean, Kentucky was cold too. So maybe it is just this team hates the cold. But I've been there in some cold games that have been pretty miserable, and the teams look fine.
Yeah,
So I don't think that's an excuse, but I'm kind of holding on to that was some of the problems. Um, but I'm sure they're getting all they want this week in
maybe they
terms
just
of
wanted to watch March Madness like the rest of America. Maybe that's what it was. I
yeah.
mean, I would think at the same time it'd be much more enjoyable to watch after you just won a game. But I mean, hey, maybe
I
that's
made the joke that Tennessee baseball wasn't going to be able to dominate, and Tennessee basketball beat Duke. That just wasn't going to happen. The sports gods are not going to
yeah,
let Tennessee fans have that much positivity in their lives. So
it's a valid point.
whatever, if that's what it takes, so be it. I think Tennessee fans they'll trade that one, but now it's time to get back to it and put your heart out on and get to work.
I think it's tough to sit here on a baseball show and say that that's a good trade, but I mean, let's not lie. We love all sports here, so it's
It's a long season.
yeah, and even though Mizzou's SEC, I mean, I think if you poll the majority of Tennessee fans, you're going to see who they hate more out of Duke and Mizzou. So hey, we'll give you that one, Mizzou. We'll give you
Yeah,
that one.
hard to
We'll
get
just phrase
fired.
it that way.
Hard to get fired up when there's not even a lot of people there to boo you either.
Yeah,
But I will give Mizzou some credit. I mean, they pitch the ball well, they hit the ball well, they hunt fastballs, and if it was over the plate the first pitch, they didn't care. They're swinging, and I feel like Tennessee kind of needs that a little bit.
sometimes those are the best ones. Sometimes that's the only one you're going to get.
Yeah, Blake Burke, you're not going to get very many fastballs.
No,
So
especially in the cold.
yeah, no, not a whole lot of fastballs, but yeah, I mean this team didn't forget how to play baseball in one weekend, so let's
And and
wait
just
to hit the panic button.
one more quick thing. I, I part of the reason there's not much panic either is obviously the people that make the rankings aren't too concerned either. Like you see you drop, depending on what poll you look at, 9 or 10 spots, you're like, oh wow, like that's bad. Let's keep it in context here. Like that, they're still nearly a top 10 team. So like obviously they realize like, hey, this is still a really talented group, and this is probably an outlier, or else I think there'd be a lot more. You'd see an with as hated as this team is, not to us, but to the outside world, if there was legitimate cause for like, hey, Tennessee may be in trouble now, there'd be a lot more national people piling on at this point, and you haven't really seen that. So that kind of tells me that they know, like, hey, until we see otherwise, this is kind of an outlier.
Yeah, I mean those you saw a lot of people kind of hit the panic button in Arizona, and then you kind of got all of it back, and then Boston College happened, and then the panic started happening again. I mean, maybe this team just needs to be doubted a little bit more. It helped with the basketball team, so maybe it's helping with the baseball team. And they take over a new leave. I mean, again, I don't think the pitching staff is going to have a weekend like this weekend ever again. I think they're
I
too
think so.
good, too talented. Um, I mean, is the weather on here? What, 40? It says 40 degrees. I mean, they're shoveling snow off the field before the game. So I'm going to contribute it a little bit to that, but the lineup is something that needs to be looked at. I mean, guys got to hit it, especially in the bottom of the lineup. I mean, Christian Moore had two of the three. I think Maui and Christian Moore had the 3 hits in the first game. Um, I forget who had the 1 hit in the last game. Was it Hunter Inslee? I think it was Hunter Inslee. Had the only hit in the last game. And then the second game it was Christian Moore, 2 for 3, Maui Huna 2 for 4. So Griffin Merritt had one and Zane Denton had a hit. I mean, other than that, kind of everybody was over.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of hits to go around, and I do think, especially with those guys hitting the way that they were at the top, the bottom's got to give you something. Find a way to get on base. I mean, we couldn't even bunt to move runners over. Missouri had that sniffed out. So, things just, for whatever reason, just didn't go Tennessee's way. And, I'm ready to bounce back starting tomorrow that this team is who they say they are. I do think there's a ton of talent on this team. I don't think anybody's denying that. The fact that we're still ranked in the top 15 was kind of surprising a little bit. Just the way that Tennessee lost, they didn't look like a top 15 team. But, I do think this team has a ton of talent. I think they'll figure it out.
I'm gonna good ending point. I'm gonna go off Preds fan 75's comment. He said Missouri had to cover losing to Princeton in March Madness.
Good point.
It's a reversal of soul selling.
Yeah.
We had to sell it to get the basketball win. They had to sell the basketball win to get the baseball win. So hey,
Yeah,
I like that.
I don't know if we had to give up. The series fine, but I don't know if we had to get swept. I wish that wasn't the case, but
Hey, so sometimes you don't like the price, Landon.
yeah, don't pick us. I guess is the moral of this.
Everything's expensive nowadays, even March Madness wins.
Yeah. Danny White's doing something over there. He's got a plan in place, guys. That's kind of all we got. I don't think there's any reason to pick an MVP this week. I guess Missouri wins MVP.
Mother Nature,
Yeah, whatever it was, but
cold hearted.
not great. But thanks for listening. We'll be back next Monday, hopefully talking about some more wins. Texas A&M's coming to town. I think they're ranked 21st. Tennessee is ranked 12th per D1 baseball. So top 25 matchup. Be there. Be loud. I'm sure the weather is going to be difficult, like it always is at this time of year. Season tickets. I mean, it's a commitment to go to some of these games. I mean, I've been in a windstorm. I've been, where it's been like 20 degrees. I've been in rain. So it's been a whole lot of everything. I'm ready for it to warm up too, much like it seems like Tennessee is as well. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back. Y'all have a good week.